Megan, I'm so lost. Will you remind me if you're doing your own backup or if I need to?
Yeah, you're good, Jolene. I have 2 computers set up here in my office. So I can do the cloud and local recordings, no problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to,
Hello.
hi. I'm going to set up the stream, but I won't start until I get the go-ahead from you guys.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then
am I allowed to share my
Sparkle?
screen? Oh, sorry.
See, that's what I was just about to ask. I'm sorry, I'm going to call you Sparkle representative since I don't have an actual name. My name is Megan with the AV from M Squared on Stage.
Hi.
And I need to be co-host or host abilities so that way I can enable recordings and local records on my end.
Yeah, I'm going to make you host once I start the stream.
Okay.
Yep. I just need to be host in order to start the stream.
It's okay. You can always make me co-host too beforehand. And then if you leave, it automatically puts me as host.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just make you co-host right now then.
And then that will allow me to give permission for people to share their screen and test things out on their end while you're handling your items.
For sure. Yeah, I changed the settings in all the Zoom accounts so that allow participants to share screen is checked off. But yeah, I just made you a co-host.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
Yep, I see the change in perfect. Ta-da-da. Allow records to local recording. Perfect. Well, then if anybody needs to test out, I'm not sure who all is presenting or if we have one large presentation and bouncing around, we can test out the screen share. I can stop mine and we can start with whoever.
So are we still keeping our video off, or can I say hello?
You can
to
have it
everyone?
on. We want to make sure it's working.
Okay.
That's ideal. Welcome. Hello.
Hi. Hey, hi, Elisa. It's nice to meet you, Bimal. I
Hi,
want to
nice to
make
meet
sure
you as
I
well.
have. Yay! Thank you so much for contributing, and it was so great watching your talk. And I can already see in the Sparkle room there's a lot of interest in this.
Right on. My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. So I'm going to share my screen we just have a slide that kind of highlights our student postdoc special interest group event, but I also want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Bimal Lakhani or?
Bimal Lakhani.
Bimal Lakhani. Okay, yeah. Awesome. So if you want to maybe just test your share screen first, sure. Right now, and then I will share my screen after. If you have anything, you don't necessarily need to have slides, actually.
I'll try it, but if anything comes up, I'll have slides handy in case, so I probably won't use them. But we'll see. So this was the talk I gave, I think. So everyone can see this, I assume. Okay.
Yeah, so basically attendees were supposed to watch everything beforehand, but this is the first day of the conference. Sure. It's morning time for people like me on the West Coast. We haven't had a lot of time to watch. So we're just gonna ask you to, after I introduce the session, we'll just ask you to give a brief summary of your talk. You could just do it verbally. It doesn't need to be with slides at all. And then we'll just jump into questions. We have questions, and then also from the actual platform itself from attendees. We'll field questions to you for the next hour.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think I'll throw one slide up there, maybe one of my summary slides, and I can jump in off that.
Perfect. Awesome.
Is the lighting okay? I know I'm pretty backlit here. Is that all right? I can move around if that doesn't look great, but trying to get some sunshine and some mountains behind me. I'm also in Vancouver, so I might as well show it off a little bit.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful
I think it's fine. Yeah.
All right.
To make everyone jealous.
It's a nice hot day. Caroline, are you also in Vancouver?
I'm in San Diego.
West Coast. I don't know why I assumed Canada.
South of you. Yeah. Well, I am Canadian, so I was actually thinking that we have a Canadian panel here. We didn't mean to do that because we have people on our committee from all over the world. But Elisa's in Montreal right now, and
Okay. I noticed that. Yeah, I know Jennifer Fair as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Is she the one that roped you into this?
Well, I didn't, not directly. I think I talked to her last week, and I wondered if she had something to do with it. And she said yes, so that's good.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, no, what happened to my, there we go. Okay, I'm going to share my screen then, just for that one little slide. Let me put that in full. Oh gosh, how do you do this full screen? Should know this by now. Full screen mode. Cool. To the AV team, should we be turning off our videos and muting ourselves now for the next 3 minutes, or?
If you are good, we can start, we consider this. It's kind of a personal preference. We don't want people just sitting there if they're not talking. Just for records purposes. We just don't want you to sit there and just kind of be a floating head bobbling back and forth. So if you're not actively participating in the conversation, we turn our cameras off, and of course be muted if you are not with your camera on, so we don't have any background noise. And then we can be waiting on an open slide, or if you have this slide here that you're wanting people to see as they come in the room, we can be on this. It's up to
that
you.
would be great. Yeah, so
Okay.
I'll turn my video off, mute myself, and yeah, we can live stream this into Sparkle.
All right, well then when we're good to go, as soon as you hit that, I guess 12 or 1 or whatever time it is for you, then we should be good to go, as long as we have to go ahead from Sparkle.
Great, I'm going to start the live stream. So do we want to put up the holding slide, or is this the holding slide right here?
I believe that they want this slide up as people are coming in, since it's kind of showing the information. I have a different holding slide that we could, but it just says welcome to the conference. Basically, it's nothing to do with this specific session.
Yeah, that's totally fine. Okay, I'm going to start the stream, and then Megan, I'll make you host.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today, the first day of the OHBM Virtual Conference 2021. This is an event organized by the Student and Postdoc Special Interest Group, and we have many events. We've already launched a couple today, this one being our second. So we have an annual mentoring and career development symposium that will be happening. The Q&A again will be happening on Wednesday. Today, or right now, we are participating now in a workshop on career development and specifically moving from academia to industry, but we're also offering other workshops on topics such as neuroimaging best practices, changing the incentivization structure in academia, and career development in general. And we also have a social event tomorrow, so we would love for you to join us for that. And you can follow us on Twitter at OHBM_trainees. If you want to follow some of our events. So it is with great pleasure that I will be introducing our speaker today, Dr. Bimal Lakhani. And before we get to the summary of his talk and also the amazing work that he has done, just wanted to remind everyone that you are, of course, welcome, and we encourage you to put questions in the chat. For those that haven't seen Dr. Lakhani's talk just yet, he will be giving us a brief summary. So there's still room for you to participate with questions. So with that, I will introduce Dr. Bimal Lakhani. So Dr. Lakhani completed his Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology at the University of Waterloo, and his master's and PhD degrees at the University of Toronto in the Department of Rehabilitation Science. And actually, the co-moderators, Eliza and myself, are also Canadian, so Canada represents. So his graduate work investigated the central nervous system mechanisms involved in the generation of rapid corrective balance recovery movements, which are typically impaired following stroke. Currently, Dr. Lakhani works as a lead scientist at Health Tech Connects, leading his team towards new product development and conducting clinical trials. So with that, I will give the stage to Dr. Lakhani to give us a summary of his career trajectory moving from academia to industry. And thank you again so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's my pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invite. I love talking about this topic. I think it's so important that academics and trainees get an opportunity to see what's happening outside of the academic world. It's not better or worse, it's just different, and I think it's important to know what it's like. So, if that's part of your potential pathway, you have a way to get there. I think this event is fantastic. It'll be nice to do it in person again one time, but it's nice that we can connect from all around the world and get a chance to share some of these stories with each other. I understand it's the first day of OHBM, and it is 10 o'clock in Vancouver, where I am this morning. So I know probably many people have not seen the presentation I recorded, and that's totally fine. What I'm going to try and do is just walk you through some of the key points very quickly this morning. I won't do the whole presentation, but just give you some of the salient things that I think are important to talk about. And then just very happy to have a discussion about some of those points and really kind of take in any direction that you'd like to. So I'll just give you a bit more background on myself so you know what I know and what I don't know, because there's certainly a lot I do not know. And I'll kind of walk through just a couple of those slides here. So this is a talk you would see if you log into the platform and you have a few minutes to go through it. What I think is important is to give you a bit about myself. I'm going to walk through this one quickly. I was on Wipeout Canada. I failed. You'll hear about that later, but this is the important one. So I think like many of you, if you're in grad school, if you're in a postdoc, you kind of are set in the concept of doing an academic career. And that was definitely my viewpoint and everything I thought I was going to do. And it was very straightforward for me. I did my bachelor's in kinesiology, had 2-year master's at U of T, stayed there, did my PhD. It was all moving along really well. Moved out here to Vancouver, did my postdoc at UBC with Dr. Laura Boyd. It was a fantastic experience. And then I was looking for academic positions, and it was a pretty straightforward, yeah, I'm going to be comfy, tenured, and that's going to be the end of my career in several years. But I think this is the part that is really important, and reality doesn't always set with your plans, and that's great. The best opportunities come from the times you don't expect them to come from. And so while I actually was doing my kin degree, I wanted to be a physiotherapist. That's why I went to school. I wanted to stay close to sports. I was never great at sports. but I wanted to stay close to athletes. So I did a bunch of physio co-op terms. Waterloo is great for that. Turned out I didn't like it very much. And that was a great opportunity to realize that I don't want to do this for my career and try something else. I got some research co-ops after that at the University of Toronto, and I loved it. And so then I moved in, did my master's there, and stayed for a couple of years. I hadn't planned to stay in Toronto longer than that. I wanted to move to Vancouver. That was a life goal of mine. So I was lining up a PhD out here. And then, life happens, and I was planning to come. I had some family health problems. So I stayed back in Toronto where my family was to do my PhD. It was a great decision. I still loved it. I think Toronto's a wonderful city. And then did my PhD in rehab sciences. But a lot happened during my PhD. I got married. I realized PhDs were hard. And I often thought of just quitting and doing something completely different and just making my life all about Starbucks, which was near and dear to my heart at the time. So, that reality sets in. I did eventually finish, and I got to move to Vancouver with my original plan to work with Dr. Boyd. But then the challenge was, we were happy here. We moved to Vancouver. There's that old postdoc adage that you can't stay where you do your postdoc. We didn't want to leave Vancouver. I wasn't sure I wanted to write grants forever. And the reality was, it wasn't all about me anymore. I had my family here, my wife, and she was having a great start to her career in a new city, and it sacrificed so much for me to get there, and it wasn't about me. So we had to think about how we could do this differently. And so future became very uncertain in 2017. I finished a 4-year postdoc, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. So that's a real key takeaway, that your plan is never going to quite be your plan, and that can sometimes lead to your best opportunities. The other couple of things I wanted to highlight here, I'm going to skip through a couple things, is prioritizing things. So as you're going through your next decision stage in your career, before you even sit down and think about what it could be, just make that list of things that you will not budge on. So what are the things that are absolutely most important to you to get out of your career or your next job or whatever you want to do? And for me, number one was family. So, would my family want to live in this place? What would life be like outside the job? I love my job. I do not let it define me as a person. I want to be something else, and I want to be in a city where I can do that with my family. Number two is curiosity. As I'm sure many of you are here, curiosity feeds your scientific endeavors. So will whatever job you go into feed my need to question things? I'm very critical of stuff. And I think it's part of what makes me good at what I do in a lot of things. And how can I make a real world impact? I didn't want to be doing things that wouldn't have an impact that I could tangibly see. Mentorship. I love teaching. I love doing things like this, quite frankly. I love that opportunity to talk to students and mentor people. And I wanted that to be part of my career and my job in some way, shape, or form. And finally, personal development. I'm a bit hyperactive in trying to learn new things, and I get bored quickly. So I want to make sure that I can learn new skills all the time. And I wanted to know that I had a career path and not just bouncing from job to job. So this was an important list for me that I had before I was job searching, both academic and industry. And it really helped me guide decision-making for me. And the last thing I want to jump to before we jump into questions, and again, this is all in the talk, so I'm not skipping this. Sorry, I'm just flying through here. Is this one. So this is a question that I often thought about, and actually made this slide about a month before I started my job that I have now. I've been there for 4 years now. And it was something that made me really nervous because I wasn't quite sure what I could offer to the world outside of academia. And it was so stressful to think about because I really thought I didn't have any real training that would help me outside of the lab. And in reality, when I went through the things that I thought were important outside the lab, I was quite surprised and pleasantly surprised to know that I have a ton of skills. And that means you do too. And we just have to learn how to talk about them and share them and make them palatable to the people who are making those decisions. So these are the questions I ask myself, and I encourage you to ask yourself similar ones. I'm sure there's 100 other ones you can ask. But firstly, it's shocking how much the ability to just communicate with other people will get you ahead. So can you talk to other people? And communication being two ways is importantly listening. So can you listen intently and not always need your voice heard? These two things, sadly, are not expected necessarily of academics. I think people assume that we are not good communicators. We do not know how to speak to people outside of scientific jargon. And if you can just cross that bar and know who you're talking to and make it understandable, you go a long way because they already assume you're smart, but you have to be able to communicate that out. Can you motivate others to be excited? Well, I'm confident that every project you're working on right now is extremely specific to something that is very important to you and maybe a few other people. And so you spend every day trying to motivate people. You write grants, you have to write project applications, you write papers to make people excited about the work you're doing. You have that skill. Can you simplify a problem, but also not trivialize it? So you don't want to make people feel dumb, but you want to make them understand. And again, this is where, if you do things like 3-minute thesis, or you go, give your grandma talk where you try and tell your grandmother what you're studying, practice these things. They're super valuable in the world outside the lab, and they help you get ahead there. Pretty straightforward one here. Can you think critically about a question from many different angles? So you have a very challenging problem in front of you, and can you avoid getting tunnel vision in your solution? And again, science teaches you to do this. It's not about there being a right solution, it's just being one that you want to investigate. Can you develop creative solutions? Same idea. So those two things go hand in hand. Can you lead teams of people? This is a really big one that actually science cultivates, because you work in so many projects together. You might lead a team of 10 authors to get a project across the finish line. Formalize that skill. Really look at what you did to motivate people to get a project over the finish line, and talk about it when you go talk to people outside the lab. And finally, this is my most important piece of information. Can you avoid being a complete jerk? And I didn't write it that way here. It's shocking how many people you will meet who will just be out there to put themselves ahead of everyone else. You need to promote yourself, but not at the expense of others. And so if you're doing that and you're showing respect, you will get respect back, and people will want to help you. And I have found that that's been the most valuable thing in my career, is just be willing to help, and you'll be surprised what comes back when you're not expecting it at all, because people want to help you back. So with that, I'm going to stop the sort of summary of my talk and jump into some questions. But yeah, if you do have more, there's, I guess, another 15 minutes available on the platform, but I'm happy to jump into some of the questions from the group now.
Thank you so much, Bimal, for that lovely summary of your talk and some of the expertise you're willing to share with us. Just while we wait for some people to drop questions in the chat, I'll maybe get us started with one. So in your larger presentation, you kind of touched upon one of the important things being rethinking your resume when you're transitioning from academia to industry, and instead of focusing on all your publications, you maybe want to highlight other things. Do you think you could maybe touch upon what some of the other skills that you may highlight on there would be?
Yeah, for sure. This is one of the hardest things to do, quite frankly. And I guess the first thing I'd recommend is, I'm sure most academic institutions offer training like this. If you're a grad student, at least the ones that I was part of, will really help you focus on a resume and not a CV. So yeah, in the talk, I talk about the sad reality that publications don't really carry a lot of weight on your resume, and it's not worth writing pages at every conference you've been to and every paper you've written. But how would you boil that down? So the fact that you can write a paper and get it published and do all the science built into that to get it over the line is what you want to focus on in a narrative type of perspective. So if you're going to write that you were a PhD student at so-and-so university for a few years, what skills about writing that paper would you want to write in those 3 bullet points below it? And so this is where the aspect of really selling yourself is important. It's important. This is another side point, but academics are usually very humble. And while that's a really nice quality and it's an important quality, you need to get over that a little bit. So it's important to know how to sell yourself without being arrogant, and that's a fine line. But take ownership and take credit for the things that you did on papers. Take ownership for the parts of managing a team. If you had a team of 5 people working on a paper, say that. You project manage a team across scientific discovery, development, analysis, and you wrote the paper to get it published. So actually taking apart what you did and making those into skills like the ones I just wrote there, build that narrative for someone who's not an academic, and walk through in your mind the things you actually did. And write them down as that. Use those typical, adjectives that people would use in the verbs that are typically part of resumes, and break them down in your scientific skills. So if you publish 17 papers, you must have had something going for you from a project management perspective that maybe you didn't even understand or isolate. You must have had to lead a group of people. You must have had to manage the project. You probably did it on a budget. And so if you're talking about budgets, how much money did you have to spend, or how much money did you save by writing that paper, by doing that paper the way you did it relative to what might have been a more expensive way to do it? How did you actually impact the field? So what was the outcome of the paper rather than just the paper title itself? Did it have an impact on practice in any way? And can you actually translate that directly into your CV? So I think it's going to be different for each person here depending on what you're working on. but it's really important to be focused on yourself, be a bit selfish for the things that you did, and try and quantify them as best you can. So if, even if you were doing some methodology in the lab that ended up being completely novel or new and save time or save money, that's really cool. And, that's innovative, and that's something you can display, and you can say, we saved 25% on this method in time, which actually made us able to publish this many more papers or impact the science in that much more. So using those types of phrases will help you. But then I would always recommend, be comfortable to let someone else look at your resume. I think we're always a bit scared to show a resume off to a friend or someone who's not in academia. Take that opportunity, let them give you feedback. And, just like every paper you get back, it might get torn up. There might be a lot of red on it, but take that feedback and use it as much as you can.
That's awesome advice. Thank you. Also, just a quick note, we are here for another 45 minutes. So we actually have quite a bit of time for Q&A. That's my apologies that I didn't make the timeline clear at the very beginning. But in your talk, you spoke quite a bit about networking, and we always hear about networking, and that we need to do it. And of course it can be uncomfortable, and actually you even expressed your discomfort in networking as well. How did you overcome that being hesitant or uncomfortable around networking, especially moving into a new field?
Yeah, to be honest, I wish I had overcome it. I wish I could say I have. I still don't like it. I still am the person who will try and hide in the corner and not talk to anybody as much as I can, even though it's terrible for what I'm trying to promote here. The best thing I can suggest for someone who's not an expert networker, and that's definitely not me, is doing things exactly like what you're doing now. So, the last 18 months have been challenging for a lot of reasons, but actually it's been a really unique opportunity to step comfortably outside your comfort zone, because you just have to open your computer and get on a virtual platform like this and go meet people. And you can actually meet people from all around the world in a way that you never could before, and get a lot more attention that maybe you never could before because you're in these situations. So, the ability to actually join conferences like this, or there's a lot of, smaller webinars and talks that you can just pop into and say hi to someone who's you've never met before, and you're all there because you're interested in the same thing. So you've already kind of got that barrier gone, and because you've logged on to be there. So that's one really unique and new way that might phase out relatively soon, quite frankly. I think people are going to be tired of virtual platforms when the in-person stuff happens again. So take advantage of that for the next few months while you still can. One of the other ways that I think is interesting, and that, again, I engage with a little bit, but I think if you're good at this, you can make a ton of headway, is using social media very effectively. So, if you can be active on Twitter, even just a little bit, everyone has their hero scientists that when you go to, a conference like OHBM or SFN, if you go to their poster, there's like 100 people there, and you can never get close and they'll never know who you are. But if you are on Twitter, you can tweet directly at them, you might get a reply, and you can actually engage in a conversation in a way you never might have before. And it's actually a lot more comfortable because you're not face to face. At least for me, it's comfortable. And you can have those conversations directly about science or what they do. And it's a really new path. And a lot of academics are using this very well now. I'm super impressed by even just watching the OHBM build up and how much people are talking about the talks they're going to and engaging with other scientists. That's a new way. I also recommend being very careful on social media. So, if you're putting yourself out there to talk to a scientist, make sure you know what your entire history of tweets says, because they might scroll through and see some more about you that maybe you didn't want to be exposed to the public. So just being mindful of that is a big one. I think an easy one is just talking to your friends about their friends, or talking to your mentors about their colleagues. Usually, mentors will come to in a second, but it's shocking how many people your friends might know in your industry that you probably never ask them about. And if you never bring it up, they'll never tell you. So, just having those conversations with, hey, I'm looking for, a job in the sector, or like, I'm just thinking of moving out of academia. Do you know anyone who works in X space? I bet you they know 5 people. And you have a very easy connection to those people. Mentors are a whole different topic. Again, your mentors, typically, if you're an academic lab, are trying to mentor you for an academic career, unless you make it explicitly clear that that's not what you want. And so hopefully you have a supervisor who can help you there, but your mentors might be completely separate to your supervisor. I actually highly recommend having mentors that are completely separate to your supervisor in your setting, and tell them what you want. And if you can't tell your supervisor that because that's maybe more taboo, have that conversation with your mentors and make sure that they know you're looking, and their networks are going to be huge. And if they truly are a champion of you and a mentor of you, they will be talking about you at every opportunity to get your name out there. It may not happen right away, but just know you're planting all those seeds all over the place. And at some point, one of them might pop. The last one that I think is interesting that I've never done, but I've heard a lot, and actually people have started doing with me, which I love, is just sort of cold LinkedIn messages. So I often tell people when I'm talking to them, if they're thinking about a job in industry, but they have no idea where they want to work, just say, pick a company that you think is cool. Like pick a big company you think you might want to work for. It doesn't matter who. Go on LinkedIn, scroll through their employees, look at all their titles, find a title you think sounds interesting, and just message that person and say, hey, I think, I'm really interested in what you do. You may not know me. Would you have 15 minutes to chat with me about your job? Just I want to hear about what you do. And the success rate on that is unbelievably high. People are really willing to give 15 minutes up to have a chat with a stranger. Again, it's uncomfortable potentially. And if you do one of those a month for a year, you might find that 2 of them go well and 10 of them are whatever. But in those 2, you might find potential new mentors that could help you through that transition. And start with 15 minutes because it's really a nice non-committal number. If it's not going well, you're not there very long. And if it's going great, you can always schedule a second chat. So I think that's been one that I've heard has gone well. And it's come back to me, and I love having those conversations, which I will recommend as well. If you find me on Twitter or something, or on LinkedIn, I will have that conversation all the time. So please feel free to do that.
Wonderful. Lots of great nuggets of information in there. We have our first question from the chat. People are wondering, do you have any advice for what early grad students, so first, second, or third year, can do to prepare themselves to go into industry as soon as they graduate compared to what a postdoc might need to think about?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. So if you have a sense early that you might want to not continue in academia and move into industry, there's a lot you can do. But I shouldn't say that you don't need to. I think I don't want to scare postdocs who might be at the end thinking, oh no, like I haven't done any of that. There's different ways to go about this. I was a postdoc at the end who hadn't done any of that, and it can still work. But if you're early in your career, your academic career, and you're thinking about it, look into, first of all, you're probably at a very nice academic institution with lots of business courses and other courses that may not be in your field. The first thing I would do is just try and learn as much as you can while you're there. So if you get to take 1 extra course or 2 extra courses, go do it. Go take an economics 101 course. Go take an intro to business administration. Like get those fundamentals understood so you can speak the language. Again, it goes back to communication. If you can speak in the language that those professionals are used to hearing you, automatically, you're elevated above your peers in that space. In Canada, there's a program called MyTax, and I'm confident there's a similar program around the world where they do industry training. They come to universities where they do industry type training for students and academics. One that they do here specifically is just an introduction to project management. And they'll come do 3 courses, and they'll try and make it relatable to your lab sort of life, but there's skills you can transfer out. So again, if you have an opportunity, it's amazing how much almost every industry needs project management. And if you can speak that language, again, I would highly recommend learning that, because you can also use that in the lab. If you end up staying, it's a great skill to learn and transfer into your academic life, and just one that might transfer out. The other one is mentorship. So just going back to that earlier comment, go find mentors outside of academia as early as possible. Get people who are going to help you learn about that space, learn about what you need to do, and get you in contact with people as early as you can. Because if you're in your first year of your PhD, you might have a few years, it's true. But the more you can build those relationships and really solidify them, they're waiting for you when you finish your program. They're ready and they want to bring you aboard. Like we have a ton of students who start with us at our company as co-op students. They then go to grad school, and then when they finish their masters, we're ready to hire them. So it's just build those relationships as early as possible so that you can get in that pipeline. I think that's a huge one. If you're in your postdoc, don't fear. This is still doable. All those same things I just said still apply. You've had more training, you've had more experience with those skills. So you're more ready. Your skills have not been wasted. Go do some of those courses and do some of those things. You just might have a more accelerated timeline. I think the challenge as a postdoc that I found is people seem to think you're overqualified. They see the PhD at the end of your name, and then they think, wait a second, this person's not going to be able to, they're going to get bored here. They're not going to be able to sort of fit in with what we do, and they're overqualified. So you almost have to reverse combat that idea and say, yeah, I'm very capable of learning. That's what my PhD says. I'm capable of learning and diving into something, and here's how. And you have to kind of navigate that discussion. and make it obvious that you can learn in different industries and be totally comfortable resetting as someone who doesn't know anything in a new industry. You're pulling in your softer skills, but you want to be able to talk about how you're still sort of a blank slate to that world, and you're willing to be open and learn, and potentially, and this is maybe the harder thing to accept, take a more entry-level position in an industry space, be comfortable with that, and then show that you can do it, and then work your way up. I think that can be tougher when you've already gone through that much training, but might be a reality in some cases, depending on what you want to do. If you're going into a scientific industry role, you're set. That's actually exactly what you need. But if you're trying to do something completely new, you might have to go down the totem pole a little bit and build yourself back up and just be comfortable with that position. Hopefully that gets at the question there.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful advice. And as a postdoc myself, I'm glad that you went there to the obviously still early career stage, but later than grad school. And also that really valuable tidbit about not only just having, connecting with your supervisor, but finding a mentor if that is an industry track is of interest to you. So we have a question from the chat, and specifically, it seems like this individual loves to teach. And I will try and make this question a little bit more broad as well, but they asked that they really like to teach, and I noticed you mentioned you wanted to have this in your day-to-day life as well. Do you think it's realistic to get into industry and still try to have some sort of lecturer position, or more broadly, is it possible to get into industry and still have a little bit of ties still to your academic research, or do you kind of just have to let it go at that point? It's 100% committed to that job.
Really good question. So for me, like I said, it was a critical thing. So it had to be part of my role. Whatever I did, it had to be there. So yes, I get to do that, and it's very possible. And I guess I didn't really talk about my job much. It's in the talk, but I'll give you a 30-second overview. What I do right now is I'm in a medical device development company, basically building an EEG headset for cognitive evaluation at point of care. So it's very closely related. So it's nice. And I lead the product development side while also the scientific part as well. So it's a science-based company building medical devices, so I still get to stay very scientifically focused. It's not a complete switch. We still publish papers. I still get to do those things. It's not the focus of my job anymore, whereas in academia it would have been. So I feel like I'm pretty lucky that way. I think in that situation, absolutely I get to be connected. I was lucky to get an adjunct appointment at UBC, so I'm still connected there. They don't call me very much, but when I'm needed, I do get to be involved with UBC. Teaching, though, to me took on a very different term. I think this is the main point. Teaching, I always assumed it was getting up in front of a lecture hall and that would be my way of teaching. And what's changed is I get to really just teach on a day-to-day basis with my team, with the group that I'm with, and just kind of walk through my experiences in a lab and bring those into the academic setting. So it's not as formal as it might have been. It could be seen more like management or leadership now. But to me, that's absolutely teaching. There's a ton of stuff that I get to sort of put forward and put into my team, and then they take it and make it 10 times better, which is the most rewarding part of the whole thing. And then, like I said, events like this, these are my favorite things to do. I love getting up to talk about stuff that I think is valuable. And one of my last slides is just, mine is one opinion. So make sure that you're getting 10 opinions, because my experience is going to be very different than everyone else's. But there can be opportunities there no matter what. And I think, again, if you've gone through all this training, you've gone through your full academic career, you have a ton of stuff to share, whether you know it or not. And there's a lot of people who actually really value that advice. Some of it may mean nothing to them, but they might pick up one or two pieces of information. So that teaching never goes away. I think what you have to look for is what form does it take if you take a different job. It may not be the university lecturer. It may be, depending on where you end up. But it's still very possible to teach in a way that perhaps you didn't expect originally.
That's great. Thank you, Mel. The next question from the chat pertains to, I'll read the question and then we can expand upon it a little bit. But someone is asking, how hard was it to find jobs on a topic you were interested in after being very narrowly focused in a PhD or postdoc? So based on your presentation as well, it seems like your job in industry covers a lot of different skills and different responsibilities. So I guess maybe if you could speak to going from a very narrowly focused topic to maybe a much broader set of topics that you're focused on in industry.
Yeah, sure. It's hard. I mean, I think that's the reality, I think when you move, it's everything you kind of go for. When you move from high school to your first year university, from your university to your master's to your PhD, you always feel like you just figured it out, and then you drop right to the bottom again. You have to start over and figure it out. So it's a deeply uncomfortable position to go from thinking, yeah, I finished my 4-year postdoc, I know how to run the lab, this is a day-to-day I fully understand, and then to go to a new company that doesn't care about any of that. They hired me, but those skills are not the same necessarily. At least I didn't know they were yet. And then I had to basically go figure it all out again. And it's a real gut check to see, okay, is this did I make the right choice? I knew what I was doing, and now I don't know what I'm doing at all. And so there is an immense amount of learning in a very short amount of time that has to happen. There is no choice. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here anymore. And industry can be very tough like that. If you're not performing, sorry, you're going to not be there anymore. And that's a harsh reality. Again, I think academics are very well positioned there because we're often left to our own devices to figure things out, and quite often self-motivators and self-learners to drive to succeed. Everyone here, is driven to be successful in what they do. So yeah, I have a long list of things I had to learn, and I honestly, half of them I still have a very loose grasp of, but I can at least be enough to be dangerous, or know enough to be dangerous in those things. But I dedicate, every quarter or every 6 months, I'll dedicate to learning a new big skill, whether it's going to be finance or project management or product management. You name it, even trying to understand the ins and outs of what our engineers are working on. I'm not an engineer, but I manage a bunch of engineers now, so I need to know what they're doing. It is a very self-driven, self-learning pathway, which again, I think lines up really well with what you do, but I'm not going to say it's easy. I think that would be a lie. So you spend a lot of time wondering, imposter syndrome is real. You spend a lot of time wondering whether you move into an academic lab as a PI or you move completely out of it. Several nights just thinking, I don't know if this is the right spot for me. I think the team can do better. And you have to overcome that. And that usually the way I overcome is just going, okay, well, if this is a problem for me, I'm going to go learn it. I'm going to go figure out how to do it, at least maybe not perfectly, but enough to be conversational with my team and with the outside world, and then be comfortable with the stuff I don't know. And then, I think the most important thing is have people around you who you trust, who can do it better than you. And that's one of the best things. Like you get to, in my situation, I get to manage the team and lead the team. I don't have to know how to do their jobs perfectly. I have to know how to make the team work towards a common goal. And that's what I've really found is my skill set to make the product development side of things work. And that's slowly over, I'm just about to finish my 4th year here. That's the niche I've carved out at this company. It's trying to figure out which path I want to be on, figure out what I really don't like, and hoping that someone else can do those things, and then figuring out the new things that I love and saying, yeah, I'll do that, and I'm going to figure that out, and I'll do that for this company, and I'll take those skills forward wherever I go. But the short answer is it's hard, and you have to be really motivated to get there.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going to merge 2 questions from the chat here because I feel like they've been touched upon, but maybe we can kind of bring it together. So one thing is there anything that you miss about academia, and kind of as a part B of that, or is there anything from your brain imaging or from your PhD postdoc training that you specifically are still applying now? So kind of taking that piece of academia with you.
Yes, for sure. I mean, there are aspects I miss. Absolutely. I mean, free food after seminars is a big one. That's a big thing that, not quite the same. But in reality, I think I miss the idea of just being able to study what I think is really important. So, or in the sense of your lab. And it's not to say that it's restrictive in industry, but of course, in the space I'm in now, I have to really think about the end goal deeply. There has to be some payoff eventually, whether it's next year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever scientific questions I want to ask have to be driving towards a product development goal. I think that, we have to be mindful that it's a for-profit company, it has to make revenue. So that full creative exploration is just a bit narrowed. I shouldn't say it's gone, but it's a bit narrowed to making sure that it's focused on some sort of end goal there. Whereas I think in the lab, you can really just let your mind, again, there's a goal at the end, but if your goal is to just contribute to the body of science to make sure that's moving forward, it doesn't have to be a goal that pays off in 3 years with an end result. And so I miss that deeply. I miss the getting lost in a problem. So I really love, when I face a big challenge in the lab, I could spend a month just doing a deep dive to figure it out. And that would be, one of the real rewarding things is to say, yeah, I can take something I know nothing about, spend all my time for a month, and whether it's a coding challenge or something's not working in the lab, and devote it. I can't do that anymore. I'm lucky if I get an hour to try and solve a problem before I have to move on. So nothing gets my attention like it used to. That sort of deep attention where you can just get lost in a problem. I used to love that, and I don't get to do that anymore. There's surely a few more, but just to keep the question going, I'll go the other side of it. In terms of the skills I got to move forward, yeah, again, I got pretty lucky in the sense that the job that I found was quite close to a lot of my training, in the sense that I was still doing neuroscience, I was still doing neuroimaging, focusing on new therapies for people who've had brain injury, which is very closely related to my lab work. I think the challenges, though, yes, I worked with EEG in some of my PhD. That was it, and now I moved to a EEG focused company. That is all we do. We do that is all of our science. So even though, again, this is kind of the imposter syndrome part, I came in as the 4-year postdoc, had a PhD into this company as a lead scientist, and my EEG knowledge for an EEG company was not great. It was moderate to good, and all of a sudden I was getting asked questions at a left field that I did not know the answers to, and everyone expected me just to know them off the top of my head because I should be a neuroscience encyclopedia. So I had to get comfortable saying, yeah, I don't know that answer right now, but I know where to look and I know how to do research, so I'll go find out for you. But generally, I got to bring in a lot of those skills. Just again, the scientific method was a big one. Sorry, there's a fire truck going past me here. That method was important, and I think the nice part is, in industry and in general in business, you're introducing people to that method. They don't know that, so you actually get to be the pure expert on the broader concept of science. And so if you actually walk away and say, I don't know that, but I can do the research, I can get you an analysis and bring that forward in a few days, that's great. So you don't have to be the perfect expert. You have to know how to get the answers and how to bring them forward in a way that's useful. So it transferred. It didn't transfer perfectly, but I think there was enough knowledge about how to do research that made it pretty seamless.
Thank you. It's really interesting to hear kind of where the bridges are and where, for example, there's a much higher pace in industry, for example. I guess another question that we had was more about job fulfillment. And you mentioned you had kind of like these 4 key criteria that you determined were important for you to feel fulfilled in your job. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit to how you came up with those and how you determined that industry would be a good fit to meet those fulfillment goals for you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I came up with those when I was looking for academic jobs, actually. So I just directly applied them to the industry jobs, but that was when I was searching for academic jobs. So I was doing interviews, I think in the 3rd year of my postdoc. I had a few interviews lined up, and in some cases not in cities that I necessarily wanted to live. And so that was a reality of thinking, okay, well, if we're going to leave Vancouver, what's going to be super important? Like what is going to be the check boxes we have to hit to make sure we, and again, the key part here was that we are comfortable leaving. It wasn't my decision to make. And so those were in conjunction. So me and my wife talked about these things, and it's an important family discussion to have. I think if you have a family or people who, a partner, have that conversation together, make sure you're not doing that on your own. I think that's a real key piece. And so, she was actually asking me some of those questions. She would actually prompt me to think about the things that I love doing in my current role. And it helped really focus me on, and you'll notice it actually wasn't, as much as I loved the science I was doing, that wasn't on my list. It didn't make it. It wasn't a critical piece. I wanted to do something that would be important to me and I think have an impact on the real world and feed curiosity. It didn't have to be what I was doing right now from a scientific perspective. That I figured I could learn something new. But it actually really helped just to have someone else there kind of probing at the things and just kind of going, one level deeper, almost doing like a root cause analysis. Like, why did you say that? Why do you think that? Why do you mean that? It's like a 5-year-old child next to you just saying why over and over and over again. And it actually really helped to pinpoint those really key things. I think your list can be, it might be one thing, it doesn't have to be 4. Try not to make it 10, because then it's going to be really hard to find that role for you. But what was nice, and actually this is why the list I think worked, is because it wasn't stuck to academia. That was super important. When I started looking, I just moved it into this role. It checks all those boxes. Nothing missed, because it was transferable. It was broad enough. And actually, that might not be true for you. You might say, like, I really want to work in a lab. Well, great. You've helped narrow your focus a little bit. And maybe, and not to say there aren't industry labs, but there might be things that actually drive you towards knowing whether it's industry or academia based on the list that you come up with. And it might help your search. But for me, it was actually broad enough that I could look in both directions, and that actually helped me just jump straight into this role. The other part I think I share in the talk as well, but just to add on a little bit to your question, it still wasn't an easy transition to make. So even though I checked all the boxes, a ton of people who'd invested a lot of time in me in academia, having been there for over a decade or so, and I felt extreme guilt at the concept of even entertaining the idea of leaving. And it was one of the big things that was keeping me from just signing the paper and moving on. So I went to my supervisor and my 3 other mentors as I had the offer letter in my hand, and I said, hey, what do you think? Am I making a big mistake? And to a person, they all said, absolutely not. This is a great opportunity. Go do it. You're going to be great at it. And I needed to hear that so badly at that time. If even one of them had said no, I would have probably reconsidered my decision. So again, it speaks to the power of mentors. Having those people around you who are your champions will tell you the truth. I think they genuinely meant it. If they thought it was a bad opportunity, they would have told me. But I needed to hear them say they weren't disappointed that I was leaving. And I think they realized that their training helped me get there. And hopefully that helped them say yes as well. So that's just an important piece as well. It's amazing the power of your mentors. So you want someone who's going to tell you the truth. If you're making a bad decision, you want someone to help you question it. And if you need someone to give you some support, you want that person there as well.
Thank you. This segues actually really nicely into a question in the chat, because we're talking now about all these questions you're asking yourself internally, like, is this a good fit? Am I doing the right thing? And the question in the chat is actually, what sort of questions did you ask the company? And when you were deciding to actually go for it, were they part of those internal questions as well? Or did you frame them a little differently? And yeah, what sort of, I guess you've already talked about which factors helped you determine whether the company was a good fit, but what actual questions did you ask?
Yeah, I mean, there's more to it for sure. I mean, yeah, you want to be confident in where you're going. So I think that's important. It's a great piece to make sure that, yeah, if you're going to make that leap, be comfortable with where you're going and have a belief in what they're doing. I wanted to make sure that I had a very purpose-driven company that wasn't just there for the sheer will of making money. I wanted to know that they had a bigger purpose in terms of trying to help people and trying to drive technology forward to help people. And I had a lot of questions based around purpose and what they were there for, why they were doing this, what was valuable to them in the business, what was the ultimate goal of the business. And I was really focusing on those questions quite deeply. It was funny though, when I went for my interview, I didn't know it was an interview. So it was a bit tricky because I wasn't fully prepared. Note to everyone else, when you're going to meet everyone the first time and they just say you're coming in for a little walk around, you might be walking into an interview. So be mindful of that. So I was relatively unprepared, but I was ready. And in the sense I knew what they did and I knew pretty well that I wanted to work there. The challenge was, it was at that time a brand new company. I think it had been around for a year. I think I ended up being employee number 7, around 7. So there were no roles. I wasn't interviewing for any particular position. I had just been really attentive to them and I was looking for mentorship. I kind of attached myself to the company president for about 6 months and said, I'm going to just bother you all the time. And he let me. And so I got to just come visit over and over again. And eventually I said, hey, look, I want to work here. So I did it about a roundabout way. I got to know the business inside and out and know people who work there. I got to understand them. And then once I felt really comfortable asking, I said, hey, is there an opportunity here? And I kind of forced my way in the back door rather than going the other way. And that's not a crazy reality, to be quite honest. That can happen potentially more often than just looking for a job posting. Finding those relationships, going to understand the business, understand what they do, kind of asking those questions organically throughout that process and that build-up period is really what got me over the line of knowing I wanted to work there. So by the time that opportunity came around, I knew that I wanted to be there. It wasn't something I had to decide in that moment. I also got really close to people who worked there. So rather than just talking to the one person, I got to talk to people who were there, kind of know their troubles. And, just like if you were joining a lab, you might get recommended to talk to a postdoc or a student. If you get that opportunity, talk to a couple people who work there already, find out where they honestly have trouble, what they don't like about the company, where they fear things. And then at some point, though, you're going to make a leap of faith. You're never going to be fully comfortable with the information you have. And you have to trust that even if this doesn't work out, because that's a reality, you're confident enough self to know you can do it again. And that's kind of been my MO for the last 4 years. I love my job. I'm very happy here. It's a high risk business. And at any point, it may not be there anymore. It might get sold. But, there's a whole bunch of different things that could happen. So I have to believe that I'm just growing my skills enough to be able to do this again somewhere else and again somewhere else and get better each time I do it. It's a relatively uncomfortable place to live in, but you just get comfortable with that at some point, and that just kind of becomes part of your reality.
Awesome. I mean, it seems like you're really in a kind of growth phase constantly. And you must have also seen the company change quite a lot since you started, which leads nicely into one of the questions from the chat. So you mentioned finding your niche in your company over time. Can you talk a little bit more about how you approach these direction changes and these conversations with people in your company to successfully find your niche, i.e. how your trajectory changed from scientist to product development?
Yeah, for sure. I think I'm still figuring this out myself, so it's a good time to reflect. Yeah, so I came on, my official title when I started the company was lead scientist. I was brought in there to help the science, the clinical trials, and drive that forward. And I did that probably for the first year or so deeply. I think that's what I was completely focused on. But I was kind of watching people around me getting involved in the pure product development. Medical device product development is very specific. And there's a whole bunch of rules and guidelines and regulations to follow to make sure you're not hurting people. And I was really interested in that. And I just kept reading about it. And I was, still doing the science, but also attending more meetings. It's like, hey, can I go to that? Can I do that? Can I want to join that? And just listening, quite frankly. I did a lot of listening. I didn't talk very much in those meetings, but I just got to hear what people were doing. And this is, again, it depends where your opportunity comes up. But for me, this was a great part about being in a startup. Being employee number 7 then, I think now we have about 55 employees just 4 years later. I got to really kind of choose my own adventure. I got to figure out what was interesting to me, because when I was hired, everyone there had to do everything. There wasn't a choice. We had to build the business from scratch. Nobody had that experience. So we were all, reading, learning, applying, and in whatever way we wanted to. So there were things I absolutely did not like. I had to get into budgeting and accounting and, finance wasn't my thing. I still have to do it. I still have to manage a budget, but I do as little as I possibly can to survive and not make the accountants mad at me. And I think I do that okay. But there were aspects of the product development piece where eventually I said, I can actually make an impact here. Like I can understand, this is, I think, another cool part about being in research, especially in applied research with, we worked with patients in our lab a lot. When you're building a product, you never start with just the idea. You don't just take an idea and apply it. You start with the patient. You start with the clinician in mind. And so I think that's where my background as a scientist was really interesting, because that was something that we hadn't necessarily been doing. I said, has anyone talked to a patient about whether this would be valuable? Has anyone talked to a clinician about what they really, really need? And it helped us kind of go back to that starting point of a product development process to say, actually, yeah, we have to define that market by knowing what the patients and clinicians need, then do the research on it, then build that into a product. And that model actually really fit well with my thinking already. And so I got more and more into that process, and I could actually apply things I learned directly into there, which was a fun realization for me and the rest of the team that I could be useful here. And that's kind of how I transitioned. I started doing deep product management education and moved into that. And again, there's an element of luck for sure, just sort of being one of the first employees. You get to get the most breadth of growth opportunities and get to pick which way you want to go. If you come into a more established company, you might be more defined, and you might still get to look across the cubicles and see what people are working on. It might be a bit tougher to get in there. So it just depends where you get in. But that is what, that's kind of where I ended up. And now I'm lucky enough that we were able to hire some people on my team who are experts at these things. So while I'm, again, I'm junior learning these things, I get to be surrounded by experts who, again, my goal now is just to keep it together and keep it driving towards, our project deadlines and goals. But they teach me things every day, and they know that, and I love to learn, and they tell me what they're up to, and I get more and more focused on that product side just by having really good people around who are willing to share their knowledge and expertise with me, which is a lot of fun.
Your job sounds really inspiring. I think we're going to get lots of people looking at that company for sure.
Well, we're hiring again soon, so yeah.
There we go, in virtual format. This is where you can practice networking. So I'm going to ask the last question in the chat, and then we'll wrap up after this. So really kind of changing gears, but what do you think were the first symptoms of a need to switch from academia to industry? Having doubts is healthy, questioning things is healthy, but what maybe concretely kind of nudged you to look into industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's gonna kind of probably go back to some conversations with my counselor, but I think the reality of, for me, I think I want to stress this was very much my experience, and it does not need to be everyone's experience by any means. I loved my lab, I loved the people around me, I loved my mentor, my supervisor, I loved the work I was doing. I think where I got particularly frustrated and potentially jaded at the process was going through that sort of recruitment process for academia, thinking that I had done, everything I was supposed to do to that point. I had checked the boxes, I had gone to conferences, I'd done publications, I had invited talks, got funding, and I went to start applying for jobs, and it just wasn't working. I couldn't get through that first door of getting even an interview. Or a screening interview in many cases. So, I think I started looking for academic jobs in the second year of my postdoc and was having no success. It was just unbelievably frustrating. I keep going because I had no choice. And eventually I got a couple interviews and got a couple offers. But I was just like, this can't be the way it's supposed to be. And I was just sort of trying to look elsewhere. If I've done all these things right and I still can't be appreciated in any way in this field, then what am I doing in this field? Maybe I should be looking elsewhere. And so that feeling started to set in a little bit, and it became a bit of resentment towards academia as a whole, which I've since gotten over. But in the moment, I was pretty frustrated, and I really just wanted to say, look, I'm very capable. And again, this is where I was trying to build myself back up because my confidence was really low, and I had to really tell myself, I can do this. I know I'm capable of doing these things. If they can't see it, that's not my problem. I'm going to force fit myself into somewhere else. And eventually that's what happened. It just happened to be that I force fit myself into a non-academic role. But, I think if I reflect upon it, I don't have regrets. I feel really good about the decision I made. I miss aspects of academia for sure. I don't think I could see myself back there in a full-time role now that I've kind of experienced something else. That was a big part. And I think the other part was the toll it would take on family. I always come back to this, but the toll on family. I know a lot of people here are probably listening to this thing. Yeah, I have kids, I have a family, I've moved around 3 or 4 times. We've been picking up and going. And that was something I was in a position where I was lucky enough where I could really consider that. And a lot of people aren't. And I know that reality as well. It's just part of what you have to do. But I was lucky here thinking, my wife has a good position. We can figure this out together, and we didn't have to move. And I think I was very frustrated with the idea of, like, I want to live here. I love Vancouver. Our family loves Vancouver. Why can't it be this way? Why can't we just stay? And so we really found a way to make that work. And I was getting upset at the idea that, the academic narrative of having to leave. But no, we're not going to do that. We're going to figure out how to not do that. And it turned out it wasn't by staying in academia. That was the way to do that for us. So I think those are 2 of the bigger ones that helped me make that push. And again, that's solely my experience. And I don't want to say that there's anything negative about academia inherently. There are challenges for sure. But I think they can be overcome in different ways. And this was the way that I chose to overcome them.
Wonderful. I think we'll close it here. Just want to take a moment to thank you again, Dr. Lakhani, for sharing so many insightful pieces of advice and for being very real and honest with your answers as well. I think we can all appreciate that. So if anyone has more questions, for Dr. Lakhani. There'll be another Q&A later this week on Wednesday. And you can also reach out to us on the website. We'll be putting out a blog post about this. So again, thank you again, and make sure you attend our other SPSIG events during the conference, because I think there'll be something exciting for you there as well. Lots of
thanks so much for having me.
From the Sparkle audience.
Yeah,
I don't know if I should be muting myself.
Can you hear it?
Not quite. It's always
you might not be able to because of my headphones, but
I hope there's more than 6 people.
There's about 90 people in the audience.
Okay, wonderful.
So.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. And as I said, if anyone has further questions, please reach out. I guess Twitter is the easiest way, but I'm happy to take the conversation anyway. I love having these chats. So thanks again, and see you again on Wednesday.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have an awesome day, everyone.
Bye-bye.